Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bug of the Month video. This is our tying segment. The Bug of the Month is baitfish. I'm going to go over one of my favorite baitfish patterns to fish. It's called the baby fat minnow. We're going to tie it a little differently than they come if you buy them in a fly shop. It just kind of simplifies it, but it's still just as effective as the original. So let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so the hook we're going to use here is a TMC 105. This is an egg hook. We're doing it in a size 8. So this is not a big pattern by any means, but still super effective. I've got for some weight, a 4.5 millimeter tungsten bead here. And it's just your regular Countersunk tungsten bead. Color doesn't really matter. We're going to cover this up for the most part. So to start, I'm going to use pretty thin thread here because I don't want to build up too much bulk. So I've got UTC. Color is not too vital. I just used cream because it's what I have on me. You just want a lighter color. This is this is 70 denier. So we're going to start this behind that bead, behind the hook point. Just get our jam knot on there and trim off the tag. Now for the tail of this fly, we're going to use some of this woolly bugger Maribou. We do want to do a little bit to this feather before we tie it in. So I've stripped off all the feathers down here at the base of the stem, the thick part. I'm also going to come in here and I'm going to snip off the stem that's holding the tip of the feathers and get rid of those guys. Okay, so sparse is what we want. Sparse means movement. Okay, so you can see here now I've cut the tip out of that. We're going to have all these just super flowy feathers acting for the tail. Now I want the tail to be inch and a half or so long, so maybe 2 times the hook shank. So you can see if I line this up towards the bend of the hook and the eye, then move that measurement forward, right here is about 2 times the hook shank. So transfer that measurement to my left hand and grab this with some solid thread wraps. And we're going to tie it in nice and tight. Okay, now actually, let's go back here. We're going to use half of that feather. That one is a pretty burly feather with a lot of materials. So now that I've got half the feather, that's what we're looking for. Measurement, measure again. There's 1 times the hook slip shank in length. Move that to my left hand. Now we'll go ahead and grab this right on the hook shank. Giving some nice solid wraps down the bend of the hook just slightly, and then back forward. There we go. Nice and sparse. So we can go ahead and trim off the stem now. And we're going to add a little bit of dubbing. So I'm just going to finish wrapping those butts down with my thread. We're going to add a small amount of dubbing here. Some UV gray ice dub. And that's just going to give us a little bit of flash. Looks like those blood veins that you can see inside of minnows when they're really small and translucent. I'm going to tighten this up. Not worried too much about getting like really tight dubbing noodle here. Just going to basically get that on the thread and cover. I'm just going to use it to cover up my thread wraps for the most part. If we get real loose, I can tighten a little more, do a couple more wraps, and then get my thread in front of that dubbing. Okay, so now that we have our dubbing ball here, what we're going to do is we're going to push that bead. The Maribou and the dubbing ball is going to act as a stopper, so we can push the bead back and the bead's not going to slide any further than that. From here we're going to jump our thread in front of the bead. Try to do this so you guys can see it. Push that bead back, bring our thread over top of the bead, and then we're going to jump behind it again, just putting more thread wraps in there, and then in front of it again. And then build up a little thread base here to keep that bead from sliding forward. Okay, we're going to go back to the gray ice dub, and this time we're going to do, I think Cheech calls this a clump dub technique. So I'm going to pull out a decent amount of this. Okay, I'm going to kind of do a rip stack so I can align the fibers so they're all facing the same direction. Okay, and then I'm going to hold this, fold it over the hook shank so it looks kind of messy right here. I'm going to come in with my thread and do a really loose wrap, 2 loose wraps, and then cinch down. That's going to wrap all that stuff evenly around the hook shank. I can do another wrap here, and then I'm going to grab all of that dubbing and fold it back over itself, and then put a couple more wraps. So we have this kind of veil look going back over the Maribou. This stuff is going to show up really nicely. It's kind of like those translucent veins that you see in baitfish. Okay. That's looking great. Alright, so for the head of the fly, we're going to use Fly Fish Foods Bruiser Blend Junior. I'm going to put olive on the top and cream on the bottom. So the cream is going to act as the belly and the olive is going to act as the back. Most bait fish you're going to notice will have a darker back on them. So we'll grab some of this Bruiser Blend Junior. Don't want to go too heavy on it. And remember, everything's pretty sparse here. So I got a clump about like this. We're going to do that rip stack again. We just pull the fibers apart and then stack them back up just to get all those fibers aligned, running in the same direction. Now, I'm trying to figure out the best way to tell you guys what size of a clump I have here. Lots of times with deer here, people refer to pencil thicknesses. This would, I would say, when I pinch it, probably be like a quarter of a pencil, if that helps at all. So this is going to go on the underside of the hook shank, right? So we have a section here. I'm going to tie it in with about 30% of the material facing backwards and 70% forward. Okay. So this goes on the underside. We can manipulate it with our fingers to make it sit where we want to. So I got that about 50-50. So I'm going to take my thread off. We're going to try that again. And here's a little tip for you. Sometimes if you just take this and wrap it around the thread, fold it and pinch it, then I can bring my thread and put that right where I want it. Take a thread wrap, another thread wrap. If I need to move it around at all, I can just do so with my fingers. So that's good, just like that. Now we're going to come in with the olive Bruiser Blend Junior. And do the same thing on the top side. So I'll grab more of this, another chunk. You can see the fibers aren't aligned. I'm going to do that rip stack technique again. I'm pulling them apart, lining them up to keep those fibers all pointing the same direction. Okay, trying to use basically the same amount that I did for the white. Okay, this one's easier to attach since it's on top of the hook shank, so I'm going to hold it at about that 70-30-ish. Get a couple good solid wraps there. Okay. From here, I'm going to fold the dubbing back, put a wrap on top, fold the bottom dubbing back. Oops, I slipped off there. Let's try that again. Pull your thread up, pull the bottom dubbing back, get another thread wrap. So we pulled everything. It's all faced rearwards now. You know what? We are a little bit too thick here on the dubbing after I pulled that stuff back, so we're going to remove some of it. Probably need about half of what we've got in here. So let's just take those thread wraps off, get that dubbing out of here. We're going to try again. Okay, back on our thread wraps right in front of that bead. So this is our clump of white. I'm going to pull some of that stuff out. Get a little more sparse here. Make sure everything's stacked properly. Okay, so I probably took half of what I had away. I'm going to take that dubbing again, wrap it around the thread, and pinch, and then I can suck it up right on the underside of that hook shank. Okay, there we go. Back to the olive. Here's our original clump of olive. I'm going to take some of that out because it was a little too thick. Probably took just about half. We'll do that. Same thing again, we're going to lay it on top. A little bit more hanging out in front of the eye than there is pointing towards the back. Grab that with a couple good wraps. Okay. So again, we're going to fold the dubbing back. Grab it with the thread wrap. Pull our thread up, fold the bottom dubbing rearward. Grab that with the thread wrap. Put some good solid wraps here to keep that from going anywhere, and then jump to right behind the hook eye. Now, I'm going to come in and I'm going to pinch the dubbing on either side to get it evenly distributed, so it's not just on top and just on bottom, but it covers the full top half and the bottom half. So if I just come in here and kind of pinch that bruiser blend on either side, it'll carry it around the hook shank so we have nice even coverage. There we go, that's fantastic. Okay, and then I'm going to throw in a little whip finish. The tying portion is done here. We can trim off the thread. Now I like to give this a little brush out here. Okay, so I'm just going to use my Stonfo comb here, kind of brush this bruiser blend. Make sure we don't have any clumps. If it's not evenly covering, I can come in here and do this pinch technique again to get good coverage on the sides as well, and then brush all this stuff back. Just like that. That looks great. Okay, now for the head, the original pattern uses a UV resin head. I have found these work just as well for me and make it a whole lot easier. So we've got these fish masks. This is a number 4, and you can see this thing's going to slip right over the eye of the hook, push that dubbing back, and give us a beautiful little bait fish head there. So we're going to glue that on using some E6000 glue. This is a nice glue because it's flexible, so it won't crack and break. So I'm going to take that glue, get it on my bodkin, use the bodkin to distribute it around these thread wraps up the front. I'm just going to spin my vise, and if you get some in the hook eye, it's not a big deal, we'll clear it out afterwards. You can even put a little bit of it inside the fish mask here, just to make sure we got glue all over the place. And then we'll take that fish mask, we're going to shove it over all of that junk. You'll see some glue come out the front. That's just fine. That means we've got lots of glue in there. If you have glue come out the back like you see here, I'm going to hold that dubbing back and I'm going to wipe that glue forward, just so I'm not gluing the dubbing down. And then all this stuff up at the hook eye, we can take our bodkin and remove that. And then that'll take a little bit to dry. We can go ahead and add our eyes now. So I'm going to use the fish skull living eyes in the 4mm here. They're stick-on, so I'm going to stick them on, and then I'm going to UV resin over the top, and that should hold them pretty darn good. So the adhesive back's good enough to get them onto the fish skull as it sits, and then the UV resin will lock those in there. So I did my side, as you can see. Now I'll do the far side, which is the side you guys are watching. Just drop that right in the little recessed area. Give it a nice little pinch. Okay, now right before that glue dries, I'm going to take a feather, just an old scrap feather. I'm going to stick the stem up through the eye of the hook, and then grab the other side and pull it through. That'll clear out any glue that was in the hook eye there. Okay, make sure we have any other glue that was on top of the hook shank cleared, or on top of that fish mask cleared off. Bottom side looks great. Alright, the last part here is securing those eyes. So we're going to use this UV fly finish from Loon, the thick stuff. I'm just going to fill that cavity that I put the eye in with this UV resin. Making sure I get it all the way in there, covering the whole eye. A little piece of material hit that UV resin, just pull that out of there and then zap it. Then we'll flip it to the other side. Fill this little cavity, this eye socket, with some UV resin. Make sure you cover the whole eye, fill up the whole socket. And then zap that with our UV light. And we're just going to go around and make sure we got all the sides of this thing. Lovely. Now, if you see, here's your chance. You got a little gap in the dubbing. You can do that pinch technique again. It'll distribute it around the hook shank before that glue sets up entirely. Stroke everything back. Now, may not look super awesome right now, but when these things get wet, they look just like a little bait fish. Okay, so I just went and got a little thing of water here because I want you guys to see what this thing looks like when it's wet. That's when the magic really happens. You get all this material wet, and this thing looks just like a little tiny minnow. Had some great luck fishing this thing on a sinking tip, like I was saying, so hopefully that video gave you guys a good demonstration of how to tie this, and you can find some success with the baby fat minnow. Alright, so that was the baby fat minnow. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. This is one of my favorite bait fish patterns to fish. I like to use a sinking tip line, something like a Scientific Angler's Titan sink tip with 3" per second sink rate seems to be the money zone for me with this. I've had some absolutely killer days on this fly. I'll tie it usually in like a rainbow trout or a baby brown trout coloration. It's pretty easy to tie. So if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below. We'll do our best to get to them. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one.